I want to know if you think these are real or if they're fake. Okay, so just by show of hands, how many of you think this is a real photo?
100%.
Okay, how many of you think this is a fake photo?
I think it's fake.
It's a fake photo. Okay, that's a Photoshop photo. Okay, here we go. Next one. Real or fake?
I think that's real.
If you think it's real, raise your hand.
No,
If you think it's fake, raise your hands. It's fake. Okay, that's
Let's go.
fake as well. That's a really good Photoshop job.
They're all real.
But listen, is it real or is it fake? If you think it's real, actually it's fake. If you think it's real, raise your hand.
It's real.
If you think it's fake, raise your hand.
Real, just real.
This one is real. I don't know what country it's in, but that's actually
It's in New Zealand.
No.
Is it? No,
Well, that's the east coast of Australia.
Real or fake?
Real.
Think about it. Think about it. Is it real or fake? If you think it's real, raise your hand.
It's real. That's camera eagle.
If you think it's fake, raise your hand. This one is fake.
I told you.
Slightly. They just enlarged the dog a little bit. It's actually one of those like massive. So it is fake, but not by much. And our last one. Do you think it's real or do you think it's fake? Real. Raise your hand. If you think it's real, raise your hand. If you think it's fake, raise your hand. That is real. Okay, that's a real photo.
That's in India.
It was in somewhere in South America. That's the biggest sinkhole like on record. Actual sinkhole. Alright, so obviously nobody in here was a perfect 5 for 5. Like, nobody was perfect because sometimes it's hard to tell which things are real and which things are fake. Right? And if we're honest, we look at pictures, some are real and some are fake. But when we think about people, when we think about ourselves, it's oftentimes hard to figure out what is real and what is fake. So tonight we're talking about fear. Here's some fears for you and see if you identify with some of these. 5 to 7% of people are scared of small or restricted spaces known as claustrophobia. 10% of Americans struggle with the fear of heights. I think it's actually a little bit higher. Nearly 1/3 of adults experience a fear of snakes. I don't know how many of you guys were around whenever the show Fear Factor was around. It was probably at the end of its run whenever y'all were little, but Fear Factor was an entire show based on putting people in situations that they feared with a chance to win money. Okay, so Fear Factor would do things like lay people down in a pool of spiders, all right, or put them in a cage underwater and then throw like crabs on them and then make them like unlock locks, right? But they put them in like a coffin and then bury them under the ground. Or they put them in a helicopter and make them jump out onto a moving truck or a moving car. Like everything they did in the show was to push you to your absolute limits. Now, I don't like heights. I don't really like snakes either. And so I wouldn't be one to sign up for that kind of thing. But some of you like to get that chase of adrenaline. You like to get that fear-driven adrenaline. So people all over the country would sign up and they would do this show week after week after week. And I would love to watch it, but I could never do it. Some of these fears didn't seem that extreme, but to the people who are actually scared of heights or spiders or snakes, like being put in that situation can be terrifying. In 2020 and 2021, there was a study done that surveyed Americans and they asked them just things and they had to clarify if they were just afraid or very afraid. So at the top of the list, these are adults, at the top of the list, the 79% of people said they were very afraid of corrupt government officials. 60% were very afraid of people that they love dying. 58% were very afraid of a loved one contracting COVID-19. 57% were very afraid of someone they love becoming seriously ill. And 56% were very afraid of widespread civil unrest. See, these are kind of all over the place, but there is a common theme that all of these people surveyed could identify. They're afraid of something. And so although we all are probably afraid of different things, one thing we have in common is that we all are afraid of something. See, as a culture, we're often afraid of what other people's actions and personal preferences that are different than ours. We're worried about what people will think, what they'll say, or what they'll do to us when they know what and how we believe. And we're worried about the consequences that those actions have on our personal comfort and our circumstances. So let's just go ahead and tear down the wall okay? Because if you fear what other people think about you, like if you fear about what people think of their opinion of you, you're not alone. And actually, I want to encourage you tonight because there are even heroes of the Christian faith that were worried about what people thought of them. So, you don't have to flip there because this is it's coming out of a story, so I want to give you the story here. So here, this is in Galatians chapter 2. And in Galatians chapter 2, we have a couple of heroes of our faith. You may have heard of Peter, and you may have heard of Paul. Peter and Paul are two of the early church heroes of the Christian faith in the New Testament. Peter actually walked with Jesus. If you know the story, he's the guy who cut the ear off whenever Jesus was being crucified, cut some of his ear. That's Peter. Right? And Paul, he was like the first church planter. He took Jesus, the gospel, all over to the Gentile world, to people who were not Jews. Right? So Peter and Paul, two very important people in our faith, and we have this story. So in Galatians, Paul describes an incident when Peter, wanting to distance himself from the non-Jewish Christians. Here's what it says. Later, when Peter came to Antioch, I had a face-to-face confrontation with him because he was clearly out of line. Here's the situation. Earlier, before certain persons had come from James, Peter regularly ate with non-Jews. But when that conservative group came from Jerusalem, he cautiously pulled back and put as much distance as he could manage between himself and his non-Jewish friends. That's how fearful he was of the conservative Jewish clique that had been pushing the old system of circumcision. Unfortunately, the rest of the Jews in Antioch church joined in that hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was swept along in the charade. So what does this mean? This means that one guy who was a hero of the faith changed who he was hanging out with, who he was having meals with, whenever the older religious, traditional people came to his town. All right, so imagine it's like you're at school, and you change everything about your behavior when mom or dad are actually there with you. Or better yet, you change how you talk, how you act at your lunch table whenever your small group leader shows up to bring your lunch. I think about it in that way. Right? Peter and Paul are having this discussion because Paul is saying, hey, Peter, you don't have to change. Be your authentic self right here, even with the traditional Jewish people coming here. The cool thing about this story is that it's Peter. Peter walked with Jesus. Peter was a disciple of Jesus, and he still struggled with the opinion of other people. Paul continues in verse 14. He says, but when I saw that they were not maintaining a steady, straight course according to the message, I spoke up to Peter in front of them all. If you, a Jew, live like a non-Jew when you're not being observed by the watchdogs of Jerusalem, what right do you have to require non-Jews to conform to Jewish customs? See, these heroes of the faith